That's me. I love that. Let me go talk.
Every time I hear I see the beginning part, I go,
Let's see what's next.
Well, screen is working. With my very loud voice. Hey, Tom, so Karen just started a YouTube stream. Yeah. I heard myself laughing when I started the stream, but
Madam Recording Secretary, are we ready to begin?
Yes, Chair Vega, the meeting's being recorded.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the July 11th, 2024 Santa Ana Police Oversight Commission regular meeting to order. The time is 5:03 p.m. This meeting is taking place with in-person attendance at the City Council chamber. The public can also watch the meeting online via the Santa Ana YouTube channel or the city's website. Madam Recording Secretary, can you please conduct a roll call?
Thank you, Chair Vega. Commissioner Castillo-Latin. Noting for the record, Commissioner Castillo-Latin is absent. Commissioner Garansky.
Here.
Commissioner Mejia.
Present.
Commissioner Perea. Noting for the record, Commissioner Perea is absent. Commissioner Said.
Here, thank you.
Vice Chair Carpenter. Noting for the record, Vice Chair Carpenter is absent. Chair Vega.
Present.
4 members present. You have quorum.
Thank you. We now move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could please stand. Right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now is the time for the commission to receive comments from the public on agenda and non-agenda items. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the commission may not enter into discussion at this time. Speakers will have 3 minutes for their comments. Madam Recording Secretary, is there anyone that wishes to speak in person?
Chair Vega, we do not have any comments for this meeting.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. Item 1 is a regular meeting minutes of June 13th, 2024. The recommended action is to approve the minutes. Would any commissioner like to motion to approve the minutes of that meeting? Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Goransky, seconded by Commissioner Mejia.
Motion to approve the minutes moved by Commissioner Garansky, seconded by Commissioner Mejia. Commissioner Castillo-Latin. Noting for the record, Commissioner Castillo-Latin is absent. Commissioner Garansky. Commissioner Mejia.
Yes.
Commissioner Perea. Noting for the record, Commissioner Perea is absent. Commissioner Said.
Yes, thank you.
Vice Chair Carpenter. Noting for the record, Vice Chair Carpenter is absent. Chair Vega.
Yes.
Motion carries to approve the recommended action.
Thank you. That's the end of the consent calendar, and now we move on to staff presentations. So item 2 is Santa Ana Police Department Internal Affairs, Policies and Procedures. Presentation given by Commander George Lopez.
Good evening. Welcome back, Chair Vega. So today's, as you guys are aware, today's training is about internal affairs, the roles, the functions, and policies and procedures. And really today's topic, really my goal here today is to be able to provide you with a comprehensive insight of what the policies, procedures, the roles, and functions are of internal affairs. My hope here today is that after today, we can...
Commander, if I could interrupt for a second. For the record, I just want to say that Commissioner Perea is now present.
Thank you, Chair Vega.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. So again, today, my goal here today is to be able to provide you with an insight of what, essentially what the whys and the hows and of internal affairs. And hopefully we can collaboratively and collectively be able to come to a consensus and more than anything to be able to establish a collaborative relationship. So in the future here, as this commission comes together, we can come up with suggestions, policies, and whatnot to ensure that, our operation, that our department operates in a fair, just, and an accountable manner to their community that we serve. So with that being said, we'll touch on the different roles of the Internal Affairs Unit. Before I actually even start, I want to give a few disclaimers as it relates to the presentation. First and foremost, it's my understanding that at some point you guys, or the commission, received a training curriculum that included the Internal Affairs Unit section. Please recognize and understand that the bullet points that are enumerated or the way they're listed is just to coincide with that training curriculum. There is no specific order of importance or whatnot in which they are listed. Secondly, there is, throughout the interview and throughout the presentation and in the PowerPoint, you'll see that I refer to citizen complaint. Please recognize that that is how it's referred under the California Penal Code statute. So just to be clear, when I refer to citizen, we're not talking about the legal status of any individual that may be a complaining party. Again, I'm just going with what the Penal Code section and the statute says. And then last but not least, I know Brandon was good about providing examples. I'll be more than happy if you have questions throughout the presentation to provide you with examples. Just know that I can't talk about open investigations or even investigations that we've investigated. So I'm going to have to be very careful, or if you have hypotheticals, just please understand that more than likely it's an investigation that is ongoing or has been investigated, and I cannot talk about the investigations. With that, that coincides with the first component here of one of our first roles here is maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of administrative investigations. So in reality, the first, how do we maintain the integrity? More importantly, is how we investigate our investigations. So we have to ensure impartiality. We have to make complete, comprehensive investigations that are impartial and unbiased. And so by maintaining the integrity of the investigation, the identities of the complaining parties, anybody involved in the incident or in the allegation, witnesses and/or officers, we have to ensure that we maintain that integrity of our investigations. We also, again, with that, we also adhere to the legal and ethical standards as it relates to investigations. No different than any criminal investigation, our investigations, whether they're being addressed by an internal affairs investigator or by a supervisor out in the field, they have to adhere to the policies and procedures, the statutes in place as it relates to investigations, as it relates to the statutes in place for the peace officers. As you may remember, previously you guys were trained in POBAR rights as it relates to the rights to peace officers under investigation. So we have to adhere to those. So again, that all comes into play. And again, protecting the confidentiality of the investigations, that includes anyone involved in the investigation. So whether it be the complaining party, any witnesses that we interview, and of course the officers, and any material that is, gathered or collected during the investigation. With that said, I would add an additional component to this bullet point. With the commission now in place, at some point, when we have a director and there's procedures and protocols as it relates to how this is going to operate, rest assured that there's going to be some sort of communication as it relates to the investigations, as long as we can protect what we can, but as far as the outcomes and findings, investigations, at some point, you guys would be part of that and will be aware of the investigations to which you can. Another role of internal affairs is obviously public confidence. Rest assured, accountability is not only one of the department's organizational values, but rest assured that it's a value that is, held to a higher standard by the Office of the Chief, and more importantly, by the Internal Affairs Unit. Safe to say, as a public entity, we recognize that accountability is fundamental. It's how we garner the public's trust, and it also serves as a platform in which we can maintain the integrity of our officers and our department. With that being said, it's important that you guys recognize, or that rest assured that our Internal Affairs Unit has a perspective of making police accountability the cornerstone of in how we investigate our investigations, and more importantly, how we provide service to our community members. Another role that the Internal Affairs Unit has is oversee the investigations involving allegations of misconduct. So just to be clear, all investigations may not necessarily be investigated by the Internal Affairs Unit. However, at some point, at the conclusion of any investigation, any allegation of misconduct, or any complaint for that matter, ultimately ends up in the Internal Affairs Unit. And so, in the end, the Internal Affairs Unit, myself, the commander, will oversee all investigations as far as the completeness, the thoroughness of all investigations. Another role is, as I mentioned, Penal Code Section 832.5, Citizen Complaint Procedure. That's essentially a statute that requires that all police agencies, any public service entity that employs peace officers is required to have a complaint procedure in place. Also, that it requires that the complaint procedure is made to the public and it's posted either online or it's readily accessible for anybody who wishes to file a complaint. And last, one of the other last roles of the Internal Affairs Unit is to comply with the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. As I mentioned previously, you guys received training regarding the Police Officer Bill of Rights. Again, when we're conducting investigation at some point or other, and we'll get to that during the presentation, it's important that our officers or the investigating officer adheres and is in compliance with the Peace Officer Bill of Rights as they conduct investigations and interview officers that are involved. Any questions so far? Internal affairs functions, we investigate complaints, both internal and external. And if I can explain the big difference, it's essentially self-explanatory, but anything that's internal essentially is a complaint initiated within the police department, and that can churn about in several different ways. It could be during the audit of some sort of audit. A commander or an officer or a sergeant, supervisor conducting an audit can uncover some sort of misconduct. It could be done during the review of a use of force or anything of that nature, some sort of audit, some sort of investigation. And if the supervisor uncovers some kind of misconduct, then they would initiate an internal complaint. We also have the ability where an officer who witnesses another officer of misconduct, they are required to, initiate, well, not initiate, but at least notify a supervisor immediately about the misconduct, and a sergeant or a supervisor who is notified will initiate an internal complaint. And then citizen complaint, again, those are complaints that are initiated by members of the public who allege misconduct of officers. Again, as far as citizen complaints, we take any and all complaints from any citizen, regardless of, whether they're a citizen or not. We even take third-party complaints. We take complaints from individuals who remain anonymous sometimes. We take complaints over the phone. We highly encourage you to take complaints in person, so we can always ask follow-up questions. But again, a complaint can be done anonymously, third-party complaints, regardless of the age or the language they speak. More often than not, we will send an officer or a sergeant, I should say, to contact someone at the house if they wish to remain anonymous or not respond to the department. But those are the different kind of citizen complaints that we can address. Another function of the department, as far as internal affairs, is that we investigate all officer-involved shootings and all in-custody deaths. So regardless of the time, the location, the time of day, on the weekends, the internal affairs unit inspectors, myself, and the legal counsel will respond to any incident that involves an in-custody death or an officer-involved shooting. As you may be aware, there's 3 separate investigations going on concurrently. However, the one that Internal Affairs Unit is responsible for is we respond to make sure that all policies and procedures were adhered to, see if there's any issues that or any deficiencies that were identified during the incident for a number of reasons. Again, to hold our officers accountable, or if deficiencies were identified, officers may be within policy and procedures, but we can always work or improve things. If that's something that is identified, then recommendations can be, made, and either training or recommendations can come out of an investigation that we respond to. We also investigate civil tort claims or civil claims. Oftentimes, the city will receive civil claims, and that could be, just to give you an example, civil claim, officers respond to a call for service or a search warrant, a probation check, whatever the case may be. And there may be some property damage that occurs. More often than not, a supervisor responds to the scene, collects all evidence, takes pictures, talks to the citizen or the resident, and is provided a phone number to risk management. Should the individual file a civil claim, the city may inquire or require our office to conduct an administrative investigation as it relates to this incident. So an investigator will collect all data as it pertains to the incident, complete an administrative investigation, and will be sent back to the city to determine as it relates about the claim of the civil claim. As it relates to civil tort claims, no different. Usually it's when a resident, or I guess you can say plaintiff, files for it's the initial step for a lawsuit. That will come to the city at first, and then it will come out to the Internal Affairs Unit. Again, the Internal Affairs Inspector will collect all the evidence, any reports, any documentation, evidence, surveillance, anything of that nature, conduct a thorough investigation, complete an administrative investigation, and send it back to the city. And depending on the outcome of, or the facts and circumstances of that investigation, will determine if in fact there will be further proceedings as it relates to that tort claim. The Department Internal Affairs also conducts organizational audits. Most of the audits we conduct are compliance, audits, if you will. Our officers are adhering to the policies and procedures when it comes to the booking of firearms, completing reports in a timely manner, booking of firearms, narcotics, money, things of that nature that are highly sensitive. We also conduct audits of, other policy adherence, I would say the completion of reports, BWC, the activation of BWC. As you guys may be aware, for those who look at the open government initiative, where you have access to the use of force or the complaints. Again, those are all audits that are conducted by the Internal Affairs Unit and then posted into the city's website. Internal Affairs also attends pitches motion. Pitches motion essentially is where a defense attorney, private attorney will essentially, on behalf of their client, request a court order to be able to.
Commander, if I may, for the record, I just want to note that Vice Chair Carpenter is now present.
Noted, Chair Vega.
Thank you. Please proceed, Commander.
So again, like I was, a pitches motion is where a defense attorney or private attorney essentially, on behalf of their client, submits a court order or is requesting a court order to essentially review a personnel file, a police officer's personnel file. So our office is responsible for conducting an investigation of any cases, any personnel files that are related to that officer or officers. And in a collaborative effort with one of our city attorneys, go and represent the officer or officers at Superior Court and in front of a Superior Court judge. And last, we're also responsible to oversee the Public Records Act request involving personnel files. So any files that are peace officer related, those will come to the office. If should they be, generally speaking, personnel files are confidential. There are certain cases which are releasable. Excuse me, if a public records request comes in where it actually falls into one of those categories that are releasable, so our unit will be responsible for redacting any information that needs to be redacted as it relates to videos, reports, things of that nature, and release those at the request. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Commander Lopez. I have a couple questions, and just to for me to understand the process of the review of the public request acts and what's available public and who determines that. I understand that we have, now we have a case where not only the police department receives citizen complaints, but also the Oversight Commission receives complaints. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
And there's two different forms for that.
Yes, I mean, there's two platforms, at the request of the commission. I believe there was a portal that was receives complaints from anybody who's wishing to file a complaint, yes.
So I'll start with, actually, I should have started asking that first. So when the complaint, and I know you'll go into detail about what happens to the internal, the citizen complaints directly to the police department. But for complaints that go towards the Police Oversight Commission, those, in my understanding, go directly to the city attorney's office. Is that correct?
Could you please ask that question one more time?
Yes.
Thank you.
In terms of the complaints that are filed, are submitted to the Police Oversight Commission, do those go directly to the city attorney's office?
Not that I'm aware of. My understanding is the complaints that are filed with the Police Oversight Commission are also received by the Internal Affairs Division.
But they do not go towards the city's attorney's office?
I'm not aware, other than Mr. Martinez receiving them, I'm not aware of the city attorney's office receiving them, but since Mr. Martinez is this commission's legal advisor, he may be a recipient of the complaints.
Okay, and in terms of, because of one of the issues that we've been having, I mean, now that it is clarified that we have been receiving complaints from residents in the city, and it was very concerning that, the glitch or whatever went down with the system, did not show up those. But now we're in a situation where I have questions regarding as to what is shared to the commission from those complaints. So my question on that is, the police, the complaint is filed with the Police Oversight Commission. They go to the internal division of the police department. Are those shared word by word, transcribed and shared with the commission as they are, or are they revised and edited by the internal affairs division before they reach the Police Oversight Commission?
Commissioner Perea, I'm not prepared to answer that question since I am not this board's legal advisor. That is a question that you may want to ask Mr. Martinez when you have the opportunity to do so. But my understanding is that they receive duplicate complaints. Whatever is submitted to this commission through the portal is also received by the Internal Affairs Division.
Okay, so I guess my question, and I hope that that can be answered, is I just want to know if those complaints, the way that they're submitted, we receive them, or if the Internal Departments Division gets a chance to redact them and then send them to us.
Again, I believe any redactions that were made are made by this commission's legal advisor in compliance with the law.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was trying to understand. Like, who makes those redactions for the complaints that we received? My second question is around the Public Records Act request as to relates to this commission. I think the concern that I have and that also has in public now is to the extent of whether or not the public the complaints that are sent to the commission are redacted by either the police department, the internal divisions, or by the city attorney's office. So who makes that decision, and who should be making that decision, given that we're supposed to be an independent oversight? So I have questions whether there's independence on that, or if it's still the internal department's division that gets to redact what's public through those PRA requests.
Again, I want to encourage you, Commissioner Perea, to have this discussion in another setting with a legal advisor to this commission in terms of the manner of the receipt of the complaints and the redactions that are in compliance with the law. I also want to just be wary that this conversation goes into a conversation about the Public Records Act when that was not agendized. I do understand that Commander Lopez has addressed Public Records Act requests generally as it relates to peace officer personnel records.
Thank you. Well, I'm trying to, because the item is the Public Records Act request and the procedure, the process that the Internal Departments Division handles it. So I guess then maybe I'm just curious. So in general, the complaints that you receive, Internal Division, what's the general process? Not to go into detail into that, what's the general process of the Internal Departments Division as it relates to Public Records Acts?
I don't follow your question. You mentioned Public Request Act, but you also mentioned complaints, which they're two separate things.
Well, okay, to make it more clear,
Yes.
is what's the process internally for the department to determine how to redact those complaints that the department receives that are requested through a PRA request?
Correct.
Commissioner Perea, I want to caution again that this may go into a conversation with respect to the attorney-client privilege and any communications between members of the department and legal advisors. And so again, in terms of how Public Records Act requests are processed, the city clerk's website has a process. It's through the Next Request system. So the city clerk is the essentially custodian of the Next Request system and how request for records are processed.
Thank you. And I'm just trying to get just clarification a little bit more in terms of how the process goes. And then I'll just, I'll say my main concern as it relates to the Police Oversight Commission and kind of like the independence that we're supposed to have from the police department and your own process there. I do have concerns about just the perception as when we have issues where, PRAs get redacted and then we get mixed between the police department and the Police Oversight Commission. So perhaps that's a conversation that I may have to request to agendize the next commission meeting. But thank you, Commander Lopez.
If I may, what you mentioned earlier, Senior Assistant Attorney, is that any redactions are done lawfully, but it's because of the law, right? It's not by opinion.
There are particular provisions in the law that permit redactions of material that are exempt, correct?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, sir.
No, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I came ears out. This is back to Commissioner Perret. I have a couple questions here for you. You started your questioning out with many of us are receiving complaints. Where are you receiving them? Are you talking about the portal? How many people up here are receiving them? Who else is receiving them?
Thank you, Commissioner Gorski. I was just mentioning from the previous commission meeting where Assistant City Attorney, communicated with us that we have indeed received complaints. So I was referring to those as.
Oh, okay. We as for them, not we us.
Yes.
Not we commissioners.
Well, technically, as a Police Oversight Commission, we have been receiving complaints. It's just that we haven't gotten them.
Well, Karen sent us over the portal, didn't you, quite a few months ago, a whole list. And once in a while, I'll go read one, kind of lengthy, but that's all I know of.
Well, Commissioner Gorski, have you received the complaints, transcribed complaints?
I beg your pardon, can I what?
Have you received the transcribed complaints that we've been receiving?
No, I haven't.
That's the issue that I've been raising.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Just
Just
want to make that
if I
clear. I
can
wasn't quite sure
interject,
the way you
I-
started out. Go ahead, I'm
I
sorry.
received mine. We had the option of picking them up, or they were going to be delivered tonight, but I received.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. No, they were supposed to be delivered tonight, and he's not
Well,
here.
you could pick them up also. I picked mine up. So is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner Carpenter, because I think that as commissioners, we're a little bit confused as to, because in over the last 2 weeks, I think the commission has been trying to get a sense of where the complaints were, and now we have different methods of picking them up. So I think as commissioners, we just have questions, and that's where my questions stem from.
Okay, that's what you're, okay, now I got you. Thank you. Well, may I ask one more? I'm sorry, Keith. Ladies first. Where do we get these? He said at his office, to pick them up at his office, or he would have them here, and I know I asked for him to come here too, so.
Yes, please
where do we go now?
communicate with your legal counsel, Mr. Martinez,
him.
and he will give you
Continue,
direction.
all right, thank you.
Real quick, back to the redactions. I think the concern, if I'm understanding, is that the verbiage might be redacted, but that's not what takes place. The redactions are only to legally acceptable standards, correct?
Again, that's a conversation to have with Mr. Martinez, and it's not in any way, shape, or form me trying to push this off onto him. But since he is the legal advisor to this commission, those conversations can take place privately with him.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I just have one clarifying question. What's the difference between the internal affairs function and the police accountability board or the post? I don't know if it's the PAB or post. Like, what is the difference in terms of when it comes to accountability? Is it functions the same?
Saying about the post, are you referring to like the decertification?
Is post only for decertification?
I believe so, yes.
And the PAB is different?
The what again?
The police accountability board?
Yeah, I'm not sure
Okay.
who's in charge of that. Like I said, our internal affairs, we hold ourselves accountable in that, for lack of better words, police or officers, any investigations related to our police officers, from citizen complaints, Post has their own thing now with, decertification, and I'm not sure who.
And this
PAC
is just the internal, so like your own, there's no independence of who oversees that, is your own department, the own Santa PD.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just from my experience on the redactions, because I think there's a lot of confusion, and I don't want to keep spending too much time on this point, but for example, let's say someone complains and then a witness is identified. Typically, that witness hasn't given the city permission to disclose their identity, so you would just redact the identity of that person in compliance with the law, if that helps.
Let's talk about the internal affairs complaint process as it relates with the Santa Ana Police Department. Again, they can be submitted either internally or they can be initiated internally or by the citizen complaint. So the process is the same. There is a process that we adhere to and follow. I will say that every investigation, every allegation is unique. And so depending, and so that this is where never say never or never say always, but it just depends how the complaint is initiated. It may take, it's going to follow the same process at some point, but it's going to take different turns, if you will, depending where it's initiated and how it's initiated. And so, again, if it's an external complaint, in theory, if an individual comes into the front lobby and alleges a complaint, a supervisor, whether it's a sergeant or a watch commander, is going to step outside, make contact with the individual, and essentially provide them with two things: give them the opportunity to provide a verbal statement as it relates to their allegation or allegations of the incident, ask him or her for any evidence, videos, whatever they may have. And then it's also going to provide them with a complaint form. Regardless whether the individual, actually writes a statement on the complaint form, whether it's at that point or takes it home and submits it at a different time, at a later time, there is a verbal complaint that was taken at that time and an investigation is initiated. Now, so one of the biggest, things in that scenario, the first thing that supervisor or the watch commander is going to do is essentially determine if this is a complaint of service or procedure or of misconduct. And I guess I can provide you, an example, because you may wonder or ask, what is service or procedure? Without getting into too many hypotheticals and details, one of the ones that come to mind is someone gets cited for whatever violation, taking a red light, and they come in the next day or that same day and they want to file a complaint because they feel that they shouldn't have been cited. That is a complaint of service and procedure. The officer observed a violation, whatever that violation may be, legally stopped the individual, issued them a citation, and that's essentially it. The fact that the citizen, the resident, whoever may be the individual, has concerns or believes that they shouldn't have been provided or issued a citation, that's something that will get addressed at the court at a later time. But that would be a complaint of service or procedure, if that makes any sense. Then you have a complaint of misconduct. That's going to be something that's a little bit more obvious. Essentially, it's a complaint or misconduct is a violation, either a policy, procedure, a statute, or some kind of law. A theft of a cell phone, theft of a wallet, things of that nature. Someone who comes and complains, hey, the officer stole my money or stole my wallet, my cell phone, whatever the case may be. That's what a complaint of misconduct is. So going back to the scenario, supervisor makes contact. One of the first things that, is they're responsible for is to determine what, if any, is this, it still will be investigated in the same fashion. However, depending on if it's a service and procedure, it's probably something that will be handled and addressed at the bureau level. In other words, if it's being addressed by a patrol sergeant, then it would more than likely be handled at that level, where they would conduct an investigation, they would write the administrative investigation and send it up the chain of command. At some point, I would receive it and I will make the findings on that. Now, let's say same scenario, but it's something, an allegation of money. That's a little bit more something that will definitely be addressed by internal affairs. Again, never say never or always, but more often than not, if there's an allegation of theft or money involved, that's more than likely going to end up in internal affairs. Supervisor or watch commander would actually write a preliminary investigation, if you will, collect all the data, all the circs and facts of the incident, and send it up the chain of command. At some point, that will end up in my queue, if you will, and I would assign it to one of my investigators to initiate an investigation. And then the investigation would would be assigned to an investigator. So again, when you read there, now if it's an allegation of misconduct or service procedure that is internally no different, a supervisor would just draft a confidential memo outlining any allegations of misconduct by the officer or service or procedure. Again, it would go up the chain of command, probably be viewed by a division commander, a bureau commander, and ultimately end up in my queue. And it either, again, depending on the severity or the seriousness of the allegation, it could either be sent back to the field operations level and it be handled by that same supervisor who initially took the complaint, or it would be assigned to someone in my unit that would conduct that investigation. So at some point, it's assigned to someone. Once an investigation is assigned to whether it's an IA inspector or a supervisor out in the field, they essentially conduct a fact-finding investigation, gather and collect all the evidence, any surveillance, any witnesses, any statements, anything of that nature, all the way up until interviewing the officer or officers. At some point, once all the investigation is done, they will notify or provide what we call a notice of interview to the officer or officers involved. And adhering to the police officer's Bill of Rights, they would conduct an interview of the officers or officers involved as it relates to the allegations. Again, once the officer or officers are interviewed, that is essentially the end of the investigation. The investigator, the sergeant handling this administrative investigation would draft an administrative investigation, depending on the circumstances, depending on the complexity of the investigation. It could be a couple pages, 30 pages, 40 pages, depending on the allegation and investigation. It could be several pages. They would submit, that investigator or sergeant would submit that investigation, and this is where myself as the internal affairs commander will at some point review all investigations completed by any supervisor or manager or investigator, whether they're assigned to internal affairs or they're assigned somewhere else. And once that is completed, it is assigned to me, and I would conduct essentially an independent review of the investigation as far as all the evidence, everything that's on there, and provide findings. What does that mean? So there's essentially 4 different findings that a case or an investigation could be issued. So the unfounded finding is essentially an investigation discloses that the allegation is either false or not factual. So whatever the allegation may have been by the complaining party did not occur, and it's not there based on, again, the evidence at hand. That's BWC, that's witnesses, things of that nature. A finding of unfounded is, issued or placed on that investigation. Then we have the finding of exonerated. This is an investigation that discloses that the incident occurred but lawful and proper. So there was, whatever the allegation may be, it did occur. However, whatever action it was lawful and proper on behalf of the officer. Then there's the finding of sustained. This is essentially where an investigation discloses that the allegation is either supported by sufficient evidence to justify the conclusion that the act did in fact occurred, whether it be misconduct or, whatever the allegation may be. And then last but not least, the not sustained. This is an investigation in which it essentially discloses that, we are not able to determine the validity of either the complaint itself or that the events did or didn't occur, one way or the other, depending on the evidence. Sir.
Question, Commander Lopez. Does the complaint form allow for complaints to be submitted anonymously?
Yes.
And so what happens in that case, specifically in the process or the step where the department meets with the complainant? if there's no a person's name on it?
No, I mean, that's one of the processes. Like I said, ideally, we would ask to meet them. They don't have to. More often than not, those that remain anonymous are either conducted over the phone and sometimes would opt to just provide an email and send an email. And that's how those are addressed.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, the portion about if you have the evidence, right, which obviously that's a limitation for a lot of things. You can only prove something if you have something to prove. What happens, or what are the policies and procedures in place for the department in the event that there's no witness and there were no cameras? Are there policies in place to address those? Like, how do you prove something happened?
No, I mean, we don't have essentially any specific policies. There are instances, I will say that, in today's 21st century, there's cameras just about everywhere. There's video footage. And so we typically don't get, non-sustains for that same reason anymore. There's someone out there, there's either some sort of surveillance footage. Again, never say never, but more often than not, at least nowadays, there is some sort of evidence, there's going to be a witness or something of that nature. But to answer your question, I mean, there is no policies and set in place. We try to do a comprehensive investigation. So, I mean, we try everything from, GPS coordinates to whatever it is to be able to, either sustain or not sustain or unfound an investigation.
Is every complaint investigated in the way that you described in the previous slide?
If you can provide a little follow-up on that, what do you mean?
So anybody that submits any complaint, it goes through that process that you highlighted previously?
Yes, and I'll say no in the sense, yes and no. So again, it's all dependent. For the most part, yes. But going back to the one I just talked about was kind of an investigation that was more of misconduct, so we're looking at it. But if this is an investigation, like, when the complaining party in the lobby, or whether it's anonymous over a phone, and it's a service or procedure, the officer or the investigator, that sergeant, is more than likely going to write, an investigator, get all the data. Let's say it's the citation scenario. They would gather all the information, the BWC of the contact. The initial complaint may be about, I don't deserve the ticket, and through this investigation, maybe the sergeant or the watch commander finds a different violation. That will turn into an internal investigation, or there would be at least, a finding of something that was not even the allegation, if that makes sense. But let's say there is nothing wrong with the video, there's nothing wrong with anything, then that supervisor would essentially still write gather all the evidence, conduct all the investigation, write a administrative investigation, and it would still end up in my queue, and I would write findings of the investigation.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you. Let's say it comes down, it's a two-party incident, the officer and an individual, and it's a verbal, the person claims verbal abuse or whatever term you'd like to use. How are you going to discern that? Because it's going to be a he said, she said. How are you going to decide which is the truth?
That's a very good question. Again, our officers are equipped with body-worn camera, and so more often than not, it's going to be an easy decision one way or the other. Either it's a sustained or none founded.
Assuming that camera was not on, I don't know if they're on every time you stop or not?
Yes, they're required to turn it on every time they have contact with someone.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? So once the case is actually, again, all cases eventually end up in my queue for review, for consistency, the same individuals reviewing all the cases, all the complaints, and I provide findings. I will send those findings to the the division commander. So again, what that means, division commander is going to be a commander that is assigned and oversees the officer who's the alleged misconduct is, alleged on. So it would go back to patrol if the patrol division, if the officer involved is assigned to patrol, it would go to a commander in detectives if the officer or the detective is assigned to that commander. From there, again, so after my findings, there's still additional independent reviews by multiple people before there's any outcome or any discipline or any recommendations for that matter of the investigation. So once I review it and give my findings, it's sent to the bureau commander, the division commander, and they take a look at it, they review it, they conduct their own independent review. If they have any questions, and it may happen where they ask for additional follow-up. They see something that wasn't addressed in the administrative investigation, something that I may have missed, and they will send it back for further follow-up. And then it's sent back again to that same commander. And at some point, they would do their recommendation, or they would do a memorandum based on their independent review of the administrative investigation and my findings. Once that review is complete, it is sent over to the division commander or the bureau commander, who's a deputy chief, and he or she will also conduct an independent review of the investigation. Again, now they will review the administrative investigation, the findings I completed, the memorandum that the division commander completed, and again, they have the opportunity to send it back to myself or to the investigating officer if they have any additional questions, concerns, or address certain things that can be pushed back, or at that point, they would complete a recommendations memorandum. So what that means is that bureau commander will, at that point, let's just say it's a sustained. If it is a sustained finding of whatever the allegation, that bureau commander would write a recommendations memo, meaning what they recommend as far as the discipline that would come of the incident. And we'll get to that as far as what kind of discipline categories we have or they can be issued. And that's what a bureau commander would do. Once those, when he or she completes their recommendations memorandum, that is sent to the chief of police for final review. And again, based on what the investigation is, the chief will review everything from the administrative investigation to the additional independent reviews and comments, memorandums completed by myself, the division commander, and the bureau commander. If they agree with the recommendation of the bureau commander, then that would be what the discipline would be imposed. However, the chief has the ability to either increase or decrease whatever the recommendation is based on, their decision and or anything that they have concerns over or questions about. So ultimately, the chief will make the final determination before the case is essentially complete. Once the case is complete, the complaining party or the individual that made the complaint will be notified within 30 days of the outcome of the investigation. So they will receive a letter from me indicating whether the case, their allegation was founded, unfounded, not sustained, or exonerated. And that is something that we have to do within 30 days once the investigation is complete.
What happens if the complaint is made against a high-ranking officer? Let's suppose the chief. Somebody made a complaint against the chief.
Now, in those cases, and even if it wasn't the chief, let's say it was a commander or something like that, again, goes back to, ensuring that we are impartial and unbiased. All investigations get, investigated regardless of the rank. With that being said, depending on the rank, it is possible they would get an outside agency, whether it's another police department or someone else to conduct investigation, but there are cases that, we've investigated, sergeants and or commanders, for the chief, it depends on, I would believe, the seriousness of the allegation. and that would probably be up to someone else to determine who in fact would investigate that.
Sorry, a question for you on that. Is there an appeal process for let's say if it's a citizen that, and you come back and say, hey, it's all good, and they say, no, I don't think so. So what happens then?
So the letter that they receive typically has the phone number of the commander who reviewed and oversees the officer, and they're able to either call them, and more often than not, they would call myself, and I would have a conversation and meet with them, and that's, there's no appeal process in place, if you will. However, should the case arise, I will meet with them and have a conversation about their complaint.
And in follow-up to that, if they're so inclined, could they request a external investigation? Someone from the outside to investigate?
I mean, can they? I guess they could. The question would be if they would pay for that investigation, or how that would work. There's no, at least no policy or procedure in place for that. But sure, I guess they could request an outside or an independent to review or investigate their case. Yeah. So how is the level of discipline determined? There are a number of different things, and again, serious of the offense obviously is depending on the allegation, that's going to be a factor. Another factor is going to be whether the public was harmed in this misconduct. Also, if this is some conduct that the officer has previously done and has been disciplined, it's also depends on the employee's history. Again, if they have been disciplined for things that are of similar nature or other things, that may come into play. Again, every case is unique, depending on the situation, the severity of the outcome, whatever that misconduct may be, will have an effect on, the levels of discipline, where it starts. So once the investigation is completed again and it's been signed off and the chief has provided his recommendation, the final approval and recommendation as far as the discipline, the officer or officers are served with what we call a notice of intent to discipline. And that obviously, this will trigger the employee's right to appeal any findings and or discipline. And so at some point, once they're served with this NOID, then they have up to 10 days to request a pre-disciplinary hearing, and that's essentially a scaly hearing with the chief. That's an opportunity to sit down with the chief. They can bring an attorney, they can bring counsel in this meeting. They can plead their case, they can bring in additional information, statements, witnesses, or whatever the case may be in this hearing during their appeal process. After this hearing, the chief will make a decision as to whether they're going to uphold the recommended discipline, or if they're going to lower it, or if he or she is going to increase the discipline that was initially, being imposed. And then once that officer is provided with the outcome of what this notice of adverse decision, then the employee has 10 days to request essentially what you've heard. They have the ability to appeal that to the personnel board. Once they have the right to an appeal board or the personnel board, then after that they go through a process of going through the personnel board hearing, and after that completion of that personnel board, they have, if again the personnel board has the ability to uphold the recommended discipline, reverse it, or whatever the case may be. So for instance, if the department decides to fire the individual, the personnel board could decide not to fire the individual, If the department decided to suspend them for 2 days, the personnel board could change that, increase it or lower it. Once the personnel board decides the final decision, whatever that may be, the employee still has the ability to further appeal the outcome of the personnel board decision and has the avenue of appealing it to the Superior Court.
The personnel board, that's the Santa Ana Personnel Board that's, has commissioners appointed by council members?
Yes, it's that one. I'm not sure if it's appointed by the council. You may be correct on that, but yes,
I think
that
it
is the
is.
personnel board I'm referring to.
Okay.
So again, once the personnel board is done, they have the ability to, appeal it through the Superior Court. Going over the levels of discipline, there's several different levels of discipline. Starting off with a supervisory reprimand. This is, essentially a conversation with the officer, and it's documented depending on, whatever the incident, misconduct, or whatever it may be. The first level would be supervisory reprimand. Then it would be an official reprimand. That is, well, let me go back. So a supervisory reprimand will stay in the officer's record for a year. The official reprimand will stay in the officer's record for 5 years, and then so forth. Suspension, demotion, and termination, that will stay in their record, obviously, for multiple years. But the lowest level of discipline would be a supervisory reprimand, which is something that would, actually, I'll take that back. No, the supervisory reprimand would also be there for 5 years. So any level of discipline would actually stay in the officer's record for an amount of 5 years. Depending on, again, new case law, there are certain incidents that those findings, if it's the same findings, would stay in their record. Their internal affairs record would stay for longer periods, up to, I believe, 10 years.
What did you say? What was it that stayed on the record for 1 year?
It's counseling.
Counseling, okay.
Yeah.
Like a verbal,
Correct.
okay.
But all of these 5 would actually stay in the officer's record for a minimum of 5. Depending on the type of allegation, they could stay a little bit longer.
The person who submitted a complaint, let's say they claimed harassment, are they told what kind of discipline is being given to the officer?
No, that falls into the confidential aspect of the officer's personnel files.
Okay.
Sure, you guys are aware that our policies are, available online. I recommend that you guys take a look at it. There's policy 1010, procedure 10100 that really relates to most of the stuff that we were talking today, as far as the policy and procedures that guide how we investigate, how we, basically the process of the complaint process, and also, how we address complaints. So if you have any additional questions, after this, that's something I would recommend you guys take a look at it. All our policies are available. And then again, the website there also allows you to see the alleged misconduct report that is provided via the website.
I'm assuming that these policies and procedures may differ between police departments?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commander Lopez. I have a question, and I'm not gonna focus on the case or the situation. I'm gonna bring up more about if anything changed afterwards. I believe, former Chief, I was gonna say Chief Valentin, but now former Chief Valentin issued a statement, and I believe it was a video statement regarding allegations that a division within the police department, I believe it was the Med Division, that allegedly operated as a gang. So I'm not gonna focus on the details on any of that, But after the chief of police released a statement kind of stating, it's unfounded and so on. But were there any changes to policies or any direction to officers by former chief to ensure the public, that there's no any perceived questions on that?
Well, if I'm not wrong, we already have a policy against the membership of a gang in our policy prior to that even occurring, before that statement was made or those allegations. To say specific, anything particular that changed, I'm not aware of. But again, there is already a policy in place that's been there for years as far as the membership of
Thank you.
And
gangs.
Commissioner Perea, if I may add, there's also state law with respect to law enforcement gangs.
And on that, with state law, does state law allow for municipalities to strengthen their local policies around that, or is it kind of like what state law says around police gangs?
That's an exceptional question, and I would have to look into that to see if we could have more robust, more stringent or strict policies other than what the state law requires as sort of the foundation.
Thank you.
I have a question, and you may not have the answer to it, so that's fine, but you started the presentation first by mentioning welcoming collaboration, and it appears to me that we might be doing parallel work in terms of the internal affairs and some of the with the complaints that we're receiving, right? So it's both being investigated by the internal affairs as well as the commissioners will be able to see that. And I would like to see if you have any thoughts on how we can ensure that we're not doing double the work, or how do you foresee that working together as a commission? Again, you don't have to have an answer for that, but you mentioned that earlier, and it's just something that kind of seems like we're going to be doing parallel work, so more work for you all.
You bring up a good point, and I think Jonathan has mentioned it. I think once we have a director, or the commission has a director, I'm hoping, and that's when protocols and procedures could be in place. It was my understanding that you guys would be investigation, or at least the director would be investigating any complaints going to the portal. Rest assured that, sure, it has created more work for my unit, but rest assured that those cases are being investigated.
Do we have stats available at all? How many complaints are submitted a year against police officers?
Yes, so again, the Open Government Initiative on our city's website provides you, I think on a monthly basis, our department uploads the monthly complaints. And then I think it's every month there's the new version or the new month. And then at the end of the year, you can get you'll see the stats for the entire year as it relates to complaints and the uses of force.
This is on the Santa Ana PD website?
Yes.
Okay.
So Karen, can you assist with that?
If you go into the Santa Ana website, and then you can scroll to the transparency area, and then you can, actually, you know what, he actually, on the last page, Commander Lopez provided you the link.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you won't be able to hit the hyperlink on the paper, but if you can just copy the, you know what? I should have known, and I should have put the QR code, and I would have taken you over your phone, but my apologies, I didn't put the QR code, and that would have been a little bit better. But yeah, if you can just type that in, and it will take you directly to what I'm talking about.
Thank you. And I'll look into it, but just out of curiosity, how much detail is provided? Is it just a number of complaints? Does it break down how many of those complaints were, I think it was, does it state whether they were unfounded, exonerated, sustained? Do they go into that kind of detail?
No, so what's on there is what, you get a monthly report of this month. So at the beginning of, instance, for the depending when it gets reviewed and generated and it gets reviewed by the chief. So essentially in the first week or so of July, you'll see June's report. So it looks something like this. And this is just a graph that will tell you how many of the numbers are. We have, January, February up until June, and it gives you the number. It does not provide a description of what was founded. Now, understand that, investigations take time to investigate. Again, depending, an investigation that may be a service or procedure or something that could be unfounded, quick, it probably won't take that long. But for an elaborate investigation that entails multiple officers, having to drive out to look for surveillance, making contact with witnesses, it could take months. So you're not going to find out what the outcome was on that, on that month. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Chair Vega, I just wanted to mention this, this just it made me think about the possibility that perhaps the Police Oversight Commission could have some type of that data available in the city's website, and as it relates to complaints submitted to us, to have those type of reports for the public there. But that could be a conversation. Yes, a dashboard.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, I think it will be good for the Police Oversight Commission in the future. This is what I'm thinking, that, as we review complaints, that those become, that type of data becomes available on our website, just for the sake of transparency, and also kind of like where the status of those complaints could be. But that could be a conversation we could have in the future.
The question, may I? The question I wanted to ask rolls right onto yours there. Excuse me, I went to Karen. Speaking of the torts, I guess they were considered, or complaints that were sent to us many, many months ago, and like I say, you're slowly reading them. Are they still ongoing? Have any of them been solved? Are they open cases or what?
Yes, they're being investigated. I can't say that, I can't speak about the cases, at this point. I'd rest assured some of them are closed, but again, there's several layers of review. So even though a case may be completed by investigation in and of itself, it goes through the process of being reviewed from myself, from a division commander, a bureau commander, and the chief. So sometimes that takes, weeks or whatnot. I don't know if that answers your question.
How old are most of those that you sent us?
It's my understanding that most of the complaints came in May, and I believe a few that came in, actually just a couple in June.
How did they come in May? When didn't she send them to us? I think
Well,
5,
let me
6
take that
months ago?
back. So it's my
May
understanding.
of this year then maybe, or May of last year?
No, May of this year.
okay.
So my understanding, there was a glitch, and when that glitch was, or that switch was turned on, I believe it was sometime in May. And so anything that had been submitted prior to May, essentially it shows that was submitted in May. So that's why, we have that they were submitted in May. But I believe that they may have been, if you look at the dates, you guys, if you have them in hand, it probably shows that it's before May. I'm not sure. I don't have them in hand with me in front of me, but it shows May because that's when the switch was turned on and I received them in May.
I think we're talking about two different things here. You're talking
I'm
about
talking
the ones
about-
that were sent by email, and I think those were use of force complaints.
Yes, Karen sent them to us a long
And
time ago, several
the
months ago.
second batch
Somebody
we-
sent them to us.
The second batch we just got was the ones through the portal.
The ones that what?
Came through the portal. The recent complaints that came through the portal.
Correct.
That's the recent ones we got. You're speaking of the
Ones-
use of
the
force
very first
complaints
ones
that
that we
came
got.
through the email to us.
Oh, okay.
Those are the ones I'm speaking of.
So what was your question again then?
You're asking me again?
Yes.
My question is, those are the ones I'm talking about, the original ones, 8, 10 months, maybe 7, 8 months ago that Karen sent us by email. It was maybe Jonathan,
Where
I'm
were
sorry.
they? Just the numbers of complaints?
I think it was the lawsuit.
They were
Yeah,
It was
the-
lawsuits, and they're probably still pending, because lawsuits can take like
that's
3-4
what I'm
years.
asking, yes. Have any of them been solved, or closed, or how many do we have left, or so that we're not rereading something that's already taken care of?
It's my understanding you guys requested, and I'm not sure if I was before my time, not to make an excuse, but the request that you guys made for, those tort claims, those were never sent to me, so I'm not sure if those even tort claims were sent to our unit to investigate. So I believe your request was any claims that the city had against the PD, and I believe that was your question, and I think that's what he gave you, that I'm aware of. Wouldn't know if those actually came to our unit to investigate, to assist with that part of the investigation. Does that make sense?
Okay, I guess so. As long as they don't just sit there and, go in the wind.
No, rest assured, again, if it's a claim that was issued, once the city gets a tort claim and they send us to my office, to one of our investigators, we'll initiate an investigation. But as the Commissioner Said said, if there's a legal status pending, then sometimes, they're also tolling on our end till.
That was kind of one of my questions too, that how many are pending, how many are being investigated, how many have been solved and taken down?
Yeah, I'm not
Yes,
familiar,
no,
like I didn't receive, I don't know if we received those tort claims when Jonathan sent those to you.
Okay.
To the commission.
So,
Thank you.
so I know that we as a commission are unable to be part of this process because we don't have a police oversight director. But are we still able to know the outcome of these investigations?
It is my understanding when the time comes, yes, and when I say time comes, once we're completed and it's gone through the review, whether we have, or whether the commission has a director, it's my understanding that at least the way I read the ordinance, that's a conversation that I'll have with my legal counsel and Jonathan. It's my understanding that you will have the outcome of the findings.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question in terms of the process, because you have begun reviewing the complaints received for the Police Oversight Commission, so you're conducting your own investigation internally, correct?
Yes.
And so my understanding as well was that once we get an oversight director, and hopefully that soon, that from our end as a commission, we can do the investigate independently as well. Is that correct?
Again, I believe that is the case, and I don't know, to answer your question, whether it's the commission as commissioners or if it's the independent
I think it's
director
with
who's going to actually be doing the investigations,
Yeah.
whether him or her, whoever that may be. I believe, at least that's the way I understand it, that the independent director will be conducting the investigations. What your role is in those investigations, that I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think that what it comes down to is that right now we can just review them. We can't do anything with them until we have an oversight director, and then we can, if we decide to, through the oversight director, investigate that independently. So I guess this is not a question you can answer, but kind of like my frustration is we don't have an oversight director, and it's been we've been more than half a year into the commission.
Everybody email your council member.
Perhaps we should show up to the next city council meeting and be like, hey, we need an oversight director.
I think it's my understanding that the council did away with the personnel board because we were going to essentially kind of take on that role. So I'm wondering if there becomes a scenario where I believe you said that somebody wanted to appeal, and then that would go to the personnel board. I wonder if that would now come to us, and because the personnel board didn't have some director, right? So there wasn't a need for that. So I wonder if that's something that we can still be a part of.
If I may answer that question, Chair Vega, the new MOU between the city and the Santa Ana Police Officers Association does have a new procedure in place in terms of appeal of discipline to go before a hearing officer versus the personnel board, not before this commission. Appeals of discipline would go to a hearing officer.
One more question. If there's an investigation going on and against a police officer, and that police officer decides to resign from the department, is that investigation, does that investigation stop or it continues on?
No, it continues.
It continues.
Rest assured that all investigations, regardless whether they retire, resign, or whatever, they're completed to some point, up to they're completed.
And it still
regardless.
stays on the record, right?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the complaints that we just received, are those currently under investigation, or does that take a little bit of a while to start? We just received from Jonathan some complaints that came in through the portal. Have those already started in the investigation process, or does that take a little while?
No, yes.
I apologize for being late.
No,
so you probably went
that's
over that.
fine. Yes, so.
I prefer that we not discuss issues related to complaints against peace officers in this public forum. If you have inquiries specific with respect to the complaints that were provided to you, I recommend that you have those discussions with your legal advisor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That wasn't my question. I'm not asking to discuss them. I'm just wondering what the process was.
Process, the overall process versus any specific.
Yes,
complaint.
ma'am. I'm not
Oh,
asking about
she
any
can-
specific cases.
Yeah.
No, I just wondered if the ones that had come in had gone into the pipe per se for investigation. That's all I was asking.
Yes, rest assured, they're being worked on. Obviously that added to our caseload, but they have been issued to investigators and they're being worked on. Yes.
No, thank you.
I don't know if you're able to provide, I know it's so dependent on what the case is, but is there like some average that you can give us, like as to how long an investigation can last? Is there like a bare minimum? This is for sure going to take at least a month.
Again, I mean, I don't want to give a specific date, but, depending on the case or allegations, some of them may take, it could probably be completed in a day or two if it's something that is easily unfounded. But again, even if it's, my officers, they still have to write an administrative report. So, there's a process in place. And so then it gets reviewed by multiple individuals. So that's where it takes. And again, unfortunately, I know you guys are eager, and I want, as much as I want to give you work, for lack of better words, if you look at the complaints, there's others in place that, we have to work on. So we're trying to work on all. So I wouldn't want to give you a date, but at least, a month and a half, from, even if it's completed, just from the time it goes through the process of being reviewed by others. People take vacation or are off, and so it may sit in someone's queue for a week or two before it gets reviewed, and so forth. So, or it could be in a matter that it's reviewed by everybody in the same week. I would just hate to promise and give you a date that I can and hold.
And for the department relating to internal affairs, is that fully staffed right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, just remember, those cases are assigned, but like not all cases are handled by internal affairs.
Any more questions, commissioners?
I'm thinking here. You just made a statement that you're working on some of the cases right now. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
Well, I'm not, but yes, they're being worked on.
That they're being worked on?
Yes.
Okay, so what is our role then? Maybe I misunderstand our role. I thought we were supposed to kind of decide how we were going to vote on whether, the person goes or whatever happened. It's the city's fault. It's the what do you call it? Citizens' part, residents' fault, like who's at fault here? I thought that's what we did. So it sounds like you're doing that. What am I misunderstanding?
Can I add something? I spoke with Jonathan yesterday when I picked up the materials, and this is something that I know we can discuss in thorough, and this probably can be agendized for next meeting. And I think that as commissioners, we should all talk and agree on this exactly, because I agree with you that this is concerning, especially given that this is supposed to be an independent body, right, to be overseeing this. But then what's happening is that we're receiving both, and it's a parallel, but also parallel without us having access to it. So both the commission receives it through Jonathan, you receive it, and then you are able to, because, and this is out of your control, I understand it's just protocol, but then what's happening is I'm concerned that this could give the image to the public that this in fact is not an independent oversight commission that it's intended to do. And I know that this is part of the ordinance, and this is a legal language of the ordinance, but I encourage all of us to have a discussion at the next meeting to think about how we want to ensure that is this, I don't have an answer, but we should have a discussion of, should this be an amendment to the ordinance? Can there be an amendment to the ordinance? Because to me, I agree that it sounds like our role, we're not really playing a role, which we should be.
We're just kind of listening here.
Yeah, so I agree, but I think that we can agendize this at the next meeting with Jonathan, but I think that is something we should all have a discussion about.
And I agree, I recommend that if there is an item that you want to discuss that is not agendized today, that you set it for a future item.
All right, I think that was it. Thank you, Commander, so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so now we move on to comments, starting with staff. Does staff have any comments?
There are no comments from staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to commissioner comments.
I'd like to thank Commander Lopez for staying the whole night here with us. I remember last time I talked to you, you said, gee, I hope I don't have to come back next week. And here he is, working like the dickens. Thank you so much. It was very interesting, very helpful.
Yes, again, thank you for the presentation. I apologize, everybody, for being late, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Commander Lopez, for the presentation and also dealing with our frustration. And I appreciate you trying to answer as much as you can. And so, yeah, appreciate that. And so, in general, I do agree with Commissioner Mejia. I think we, as the commissioners, we should think about beginning to agendize more robust discussions so that we can openly have conversations about some of these issues that I think all of us are concerned from what I've been hearing. And so I think it's time for us to encourage all of us to begin requesting for items to be agendized. The other issue I just want to, in my closing comments that I want to mention, I am deeply concerned about the perception right now of the public that our Oversight Commission is not as independent as it should be. And it's not that whether that is the case, it's more about the perception. And I think that, again, having those robust conversations will help kind of like clarify things, these concerns that we have, and particularly concerned about, the public's perception around, whether or not these complaints, or we get to see them first and we get to review them. And the other major concern that I do have is the oversight director that we have been supposed to have for a while. So I think I am very concerned about those. It's not something that we can do anything about other than encourage our council members to move on this. Those are my comments for today.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and not to reiterate what I had already mentioned about that, I do think that we should all be reading the ordinance again. I know I've read it several times, but I do think that it's really important that we all understand that and understand the limitations and maybe talk to our council members to see and better understand the mechanisms and the reasons why that language was inserted, right? There was obviously a reason why it was inserted that way, or maybe it was a miscommunication about how they thought it was going to be applied, like legally. And so I think there's definitely some gaps there that we need to look at. And yes, I agree about the public concern. It's been something that I've been hearing. I'm sure we all have read the Register news as well. So, but thank you, Commander, for the presentation.
No comments, thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Commander Lopez, for that presentation. And I just want to say and remind our commissioners that we have two very important roles. I know one of them is to review complaints, but another one is also to review procedures and policies. And that's something that I don't think we need a police oversight director to start looking into those. And I'll give a heads up to, I guess, the police department. I do want to ask about how police officers patrol neighborhoods and what's the policy revolving around that, because I'll speak for myself. especially with my parents live, sometimes you just kind of wish a police officer would just kind of drive by. I feel like when I've gone on my ride-alongs, we just drove by big streets, but never through any neighborhoods. And I feel that once in a while, driving through a neighborhood, you kind of give that impression to people, that you do care. Maybe, I don't know if there's like an actual policy in place as to why police officers don't really patrol through neighborhoods or just ride through neighborhoods. But I'll say, as a personal experience, in my neighborhood, we had an issue where there was a section where if you park there, you're kind of surrounded by walls, so you have a lot of privacy. And what was happening was that people were going there, drinking there, and loitering, throwing their beer cans everywhere. And when I made a complaint, all it took was a police officer driving by my neighborhood a few days, and that problem went away. So I think we always talk about wanting to prevent crime, not just being reactive. I feel like it would be great if, I know we're understaffed, I know it gets busy sometimes, but instead of driving up and down Main Street 10 times, how about we take the long way and drive through neighborhoods a little bit more often? That's something that I feel like the public would really appreciate.
Chair Vega, thank you for the suggestion, and I would encourage, I'll make sure to get our directed officers in touch with you. A lot of times, what we don't know. And I can tell you, working the patrol in the past, we probably, we do drive through the residential streets, but not through all neighborhoods, because, we're maybe addressing other complaints or concerns where people are calling. And sometimes, if, unfortunately, like you said, up until you called, then officers were responding or going. So one of the things that I would encourage, the commissioners or anyone listening to the meeting today is call the dispatch, and you can request for patrol checks, specific times, specific dates, tell like, hey, they're not here right now, but, they hang out at 8:00 at this time, and this is what they do. And then, more often than not, those will be addressed. Those patrol checks will be briefed during briefing, and then officers will be encouraged to go out there and address those complaints. But I will make sure to get our directed officers who have access to the entire city, and they're not, stuck in one district, that can, address those type of complaints.
Can I add one thing? Sorry. I've actually talked to Jonathan about this particular process that we're having too, in terms of when one of the commissioners gives an action to the staff, that is actually, we need to first establish a protocol where that everyone agrees, because for instance, what you're suggesting, actually research shows how that's harmful. Now, we can have a conversation later when it's agendized, but we need to be cautious and careful that staff is not taking individual opinions and applying them to policy changes, because that's not the protocol, nor do we have one. So I just want to caution that, from my understanding, Jonathan had explained to me that he was going to, or had already told Santa Ana PD that when you hear a commissioner comment, unless it's directed in there of something that we can have access to information or data, that any policy changes has to be consensus by everyone, or at least a discussion. And so I would caution to take anything as a point of action until everyone agrees, because we want to make sure we're not producing harmful policies that we know actually impact certain communities.
Commissioner
And
Mejia.
to clarify, mine was not a directive at all. It was something that I wanted to bring as an item, but I wanted to bring that up as a reminder to the commission that we also, part of our role is to look at procedures as an agenda item.
No, I understood, and I didn't take it as a directive. And just to your point, Commissioner Mejia, rest assured that if there's a request or something like that, or a suggestion, it's not a suggestion is not going to really change policy. If it's a concern, that is brought up here, that's I would address it and maybe send officers out there. But I can assure you that this request or suggestion was not going to create any policy change or directive on our behalf.
Okay, with no further questions, I hereby adjourn the commission meeting. The time is 6:37 p.m. The next meeting of the Police Oversight Commission is scheduled for August 8th, 2024 at 5 p.m.
One more thing, I had actually ordered coffee for the group coming in today. It was a little late, so feel free to grab a cup on your way out. No, it's actually still warm, but by all means,